Welcome to the Wild Wisdom Podcast, where we learn how to heal our hearts, find our voices, and step into our authentic power as the wild women that we were destined to be. I'm your host, Jessica Love. Settle into whichever way you like to listen to the Wild Wisdom Podcast, and let's get started.
All right. Hey everyone, welcome back to Wild Wisdom. Today I have a very special guest with us, Sonya Highfield. She's a 2 times business owner, podcast host, and the wealth expansion coach for creative entrepreneurs who want to expand their abundance spiritually and strategically by building profitable businesses doing what they love while prioritizing their well-being. Hi, Sonya, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Of course, I absolutely just love this container in Wild Wisdom because I always get to meet these really fabulous and beautiful wild women on such unique paths. And something that I thought was so unique about the work that you do as a business guide is that you have a specialty in Akashic Records reading. For our viewers who don't know, I would be so curious if you could just give us an overview of what the Akashic Records are. But before we do that, we have to ask and we have to know, what are your zodiac big three? What are your astrology big three placements? Sun, moon, and rising.
Okay, so I am Aries Sun, Pisces Moon, and Rising.
I love Aries, and personally, selfishly, I'm so happy you're here because I love Aries energy. And it's really cool to see that you have Pisces ascendant and your moon too. What a beautiful series. I feel like Aries really helps you with that business charge and the motivation and the drive. And then you have this like deep intuition and creativity. And as you know, psychic abilities, which is so powerful that you work with this other side in your Akashic Records training. That's so lovely.
Yeah, it's a fun mix because everyone kind of first experiences me as like super chill, super zen, very calm, and like that is for sure me. But then once you get to know me, the Aries fire comes down. And it's like, ooh, she's a little spicy.
Yes, yeah. I love that. Who doesn't love like a nice, well, I don't drink anymore, but I used to love a nice like cucumber margarita with like a spicy rim.
Mhm.
It's like that balance of the cooling and also the spicy together.
Yes, exactly.
Um, uh, so tell us about the Akashic Records. I have some understanding, but I'm going to pretend that I don't have any because I know a lot of viewers are probably really curious about what they are. And yeah, just the
Yeah.
floor.
Yeah, so the Akashic Records is one of those things that I think can sound really big and vague and like, what the heck? And that was how I felt when someone first started telling me about it. I was like, I do not understand. You're pulling what from where? Like, I was like, I don't get it. Um, how I like to explain it is tapping into this cosmic wisdom that is like your soul's documentary, the documentary of your soul. And so it is something that everyone can do, like no gatekeeping. It's definitely something that is available for people to learn. Um, and if you're called to it, if you're like, ooh, I feel the ping to understand or explore it, then that's your time. And if you're like, I still don't get it, cool, that's totally fine. Like it just might not be your time. Um, so yeah, it's really using an intuitive process, which, like all the other intuitive processes, it's about trust. And what's really cool about the Akashic Records is that you can validate things really fast, and we can tap into past lives. We can access guidance for your current life. And there's different levels in the Akashic Records, right? So we call it the records. So, like, our human brains understand what it might be, but it's not a physical thing, right? And there's a couple like layers of healing that happens in the records. And there's your soul guides who are giving us the information, the channeled messages, and energy healings and guidance that comes through. And the soul guides are referenced as the masters, teachers, and loved ones. And so when we're accessing the records, it's not like mediumship where you're like, Grandma Sally's coming in to say this. It could be a loved one of yours that has passed that's giving guidance, but it it pretty much never is like, hey, here's this specific person and they're sharing this message. Um, when messages come in, for me, I hear, see, like see in my mind's eye and feel things, and also just have that like claircognizant knowing. Um, and people who read the records might receive messages in different ways. Um, but what I have found is that it's highly practical, it's highly specific, and it's like the most potent thing that I have found to give you self affirmation, self love, self understanding, and really like pure to you guidance that just like our human brains wouldn't come up with on our own. So that was a very long explanation, but hopefully that's
Felt like
helpful.
that was what we needed, right? We have so many tools, and one of my intentions with this podcast is to share as much as we can about all the tools for listeners so they can start to cultivate a practice or even call in a team, like a care team that is
Mhm.
the best for them. I remember learning about when I was in therapy for an eating disorder. I had like some limited resources, so I stuck with just a therapist, but I kept hearing this conversation over and over again about a care team, a care team.
Yeah,
And my therapist would always say, like, let's build your care team. What does your care team look like? And usually in that situation, it means more like a dietitian, a therapist. Sometimes people have a psychiatrist and like some other practitioner.
yeah,
But it's cool, like I'm getting this idea now of like a spiritual care team. So wherever you are on your spiritual journey or even your business journey, because I know you are definitely a business guide too, like you
yeah.
can have this catalog of guides to support you. And I'm also hearing that that's what the Akashic Records is in a way, is it's not necessarily you accessing or channeling a specific person on the other side or just a specific guide. It's like being open to whatever or whomever wants to come through for you, whatever spiritual entities or
Yeah.
humans like want to speak to you in that moment for what you need. I am curious about something now. While we're talking about this, I'm thinking about how do you, as a guide, like discern the energies that you might be channeling or not channeling, but I know you said connecting to, like in the Akashic Records. For example, like have you ever had an experience where you might be doing a reading on someone or a Akashic Record session on someone and you tap into an energy that is scary maybe, or like is it only like light beings that are there? I'm just curious about this.
The records are only loving, healing, non judgmental. Um, I personally have been working on my spiritual journey, spiritual path for about 10 years. And I know that people have lots of stories about like entities and scary shit. I've never had any of that in my experience. That doesn't mean that doesn't exist, but I've personally never had those experiences. And especially in the records, um, it is all love. And even when we're accessing like traumas from past lives, it's very gentle the way it comes through. It doesn't come through where you're like reliving. It's not all of a sudden like taking over your body. It's very like neutrally relayed. And so the information that comes up is only things that you are ready to hear and process. And they offer healing. It's like there's these three levels of healing um, that come along with the guidance. And oftentimes, people might be asking, like, why do I have this pattern in this lifetime or this fear? And we can access, okay, here's why, because in a past life, this thing happened to you, and now you have this fear. But It's not just this happened to you or, this terrible thing occurred and you witnessed it or whatever. It's also what can you learn from that and how can you shift your energy, shift your perspective, create healing for yourself. Even the guides often offer practices for people so that you can ground yourself, tap into your higher self, um, like mindset shifts for you to understand. And nothing that has ever come through, even though it can be intense, has ever been like scary or traumatizing.
Okay. I trust that, and I've had similar experience to you, and I've been in this environment for a similar amount of time. So I do really appreciate you breaking that down for us and just
Mhm,
being resolve any fear that any listeners might have about this process. Now, Sonia, something you mentioned while you're explaining that question is that there's three layers of healing that can be achieved through Akashic Records reading. Can you share more with us about what those levels are?
yes. And I'm actually maybe gonna pull out my notes because
Of course.
it's late at night and my mom brain is like, let me make sure that I'm actually
Yeah.
saying the right things. So, okay. I actually have my notes here that I keep in my desk that I took when I was learning about the records. I learned from this great woman. Her name is Dottie Lemoreau, and she taught a course. That's how I learned. So you can learn on your own, but just like side note, it's super helpful if you have someone who can really walk you through it. And okay, so I have the three levels of healing occur naturally in the records. And what are those different levels?
I also want
Um,
to thank you for thanking and crediting your teacher in this space. I feel like I know that's such a sacred, I feel like that's a sacred part of our leadership as spiritual beings is giving credit and honoring our teachers because there's a great quote I love from somebody that I've listened to great a lot of their content. And
mhm,
she says that you can't repay a teacher in 1,000 lifetimes. I'm
mm.
grateful that you mentioned her in this space and we can like feel her energy too.
Yeah, I love that. So, yeah, it's always so important. Just like give a little shout out to those who have paved the way for you, right? Um, okay, so different ways that healing can come about. Um, on a soul level. So, literally healing part of your soul's experience so that you're not like repeating the same lessons again and again, right? Where you're like, okay, got it this time on earth. We don't have to do it that way. And then there's really like emotional healing that occurs. And there can be physical healing as well. That's a little like I don't know if for me, I'm gonna put that in the category of like energetic healing. It can impact the physical as well, but um, it's really based in your energy, right? How energy impacts your system. So, um, yeah, those are the three kinds of levels, and it's often kind of all wrapped up into one, right? It's not necessarily like, okay, we're just working on this level today. Sometimes it's clear cut like that, but oftentimes you don't even have to be thinking about like, how am I healing today? It's just your experience of working with the record. So I find when I do readings for people, when I'm doing this work for my clients, it is so energy giving to me, especially if I'm having like a tough day, uh, like physically or emotionally, mentally, anything, working with the records, I literally always feel better, even if I'm not doing it for myself.
Wow.
Just by being in the energy, it's like it literally is like naturally healing, is how they say it. And it does feel that way for me.
Totally. What a beautiful opportunity that you have a practice that also pours into you as a guide, as you're guiding. And I have a teacher, his name's John Shotland in psychosynthesis coaching. And he says that when you're coaching your client, it's also healing for you because you're coaching yourself. And a lot of the
Mhm.
times I feel as if the people that come to us for healing or for readings, like they're mirroring back to you something that you might be processing within yourself, or somebody that you love too that is going through something, and you can kind of get this new perspective of life, because we are all so connected. We all are love, and we're in this consciousness together.
Yeah, and I will say, like, one cool thing that I've been doing as well is um, group readings, in the sense that uh, someone who hosts some kind of community will ask me questions for their group as like a collective. And so I'll get to bring kind of thoughts and journal prompts that I channel from the records for these collective groups. And that's super powerful and helpful for me as well, because they're like, yeah, this really is collective wisdom. And it's like what affects one affects us all, right? And so that's been a really beautiful experience as well. Is it's not just, one to one. It is highly personal, but you can also tap in for the collective, for specific groups. Um, yeah, you can tap into any entity on Earth, and so that's a really cool way to like experience the guidance and healing as well.
Yeah. Wow, that is so freaking cool that you could connect to a whole group and do that kind of work. How healing and how Aquarian is that?
Yeah.
That's so cool. I love that. Okay, so I have to ask. So I know you work as a wealth expansion coach as well. I'm
Mhm.
curious how, personally first, like how has working with the Akashic Records expanded your wealth? And then secondly, like maybe you could even bring in one client story that is more vague if you feel comfortable sharing, or just like a trend that you've seen in your clients since using this in your wealth expansion coaching practice.
Yeah. So the first thing that I need to tell people is that I call myself a wealth expansion coach, not because I just talk about money with people, but because the original definition of wealth is the condition of well being. So when I first heard that, it was a big light bulb moment for me, because I had been focused on helping people with their money mindset and with pricing and, understanding their worth. And what I realized was that, as I like to say, is like, it's not all about the money, but it's not about the money. And so we were getting into, their inner child work, their what I call business trauma. We were getting into their confidence, their self love, their relationship with their partners. Like we were getting so much deeper than just the dollars. And so when I heard this definition of wealth, I was like, okay, that makes so much sense to me, because I'm a very holistically minded person, anyways. And so yeah, it's really about well-being. And for me, that means you're human first, business owner second. And that's always my approach. And I understand being highly ambitious and also being a sensitive human, being a spiritual human, like all those different facets of ourselves. And so um, that's just like my disclaimer I need to share with everyone when I say wealth expansion. What does that actually mean? It means we're doing the inner and the outer work to bring well-being to every area of your life and business. Okay, there's that. Your question. How's the Akashic helped? So, oh, it's such a big question, because I've been accessing the records now consciously for about 4 years. And it's one of those things where I I didn't even know about it. Like I haven't always known about this thing. I wasn't always intending to do this work. And yet I feel like it has helped me step into the exact person that I've always felt I was meant to be, and has helped me really stand in my truth of like, yeah, I'm a guide. Like, yes, I also like give myself the title of practical oracle, um, which is fun. And like, I've always been that person that people come to for advice and guidance. And all of a sudden, I felt like I had this tool that was so beyond me, and yet was so beautifully and powerfully channeled through me that it really helped from an ego perspective be like, I am powerful, I am super wise, and I'm not the end all be all. I don't need to be anyone's guru. I don't need to have all the answers. And as someone who likes to show up super prepared, I like to be like my I like to be the everything for my clients where I'm like, let me help you with your copy and mindset and like do all the things. But this has been really helpful and yeah, just like an interesting perspective where I'm like, I don't even need to prepare anything. I just show up and channel for you, and your soul guides give you the answers that I could not even give you. And they're so exactly perfect for you. And then we can walk through, like the business and mindset steps or the resources and tools, the things to supplement this guidance that's the highest alignment for you. And it's been really awesome in terms of also who it's brought into my world. And it's been such an honor. Like, I literally always tell people it's an honor to read for you because it truly is. I've read for immigration lawyers, I've read for shamans, I've read for realtors, I've read for, like moms, business owners. Like, it runs the gamut of people who have come in. And it is such, I'm trying not to cry about it. It's really such an honor to witness people be so curious about themselves and brave enough to ask hard questions and to say like, I have big dreams, and also here's where I'm like really stuck or afraid or like trying my best but it's not turning out the way I want, or like here's what I know I'm meant to do, but how do I do it, and how do I also like be a good human, and how do I, right, like just all those deep multifaceted big purpose questions that people have, and to get to hold space for those kinds of questions, it makes me emotional about it. Like honestly, I often cry on client calls because it's so powerful to bring through the guidance from people's whose soul guides who are like so loving, so powerful, so spot on, so there to support you deeply to be the person you're meant to be, to live your truth, your purpose, your greatest joy, your depths of who you are. It's just really such an honor to do this work.
I can really feel that the reverence you have for the work you do. And I just so value and appreciate the pillar that you hold in your work. And I want you to know that it is truly transformative to be a bridge for somebody on their healing journey, a bridge between two worlds or multiple layers of the dimensions of the cosmos.
Yeah.
However, it is that this information comes through is so healing and so nurturing. And I hope you know, not from an egoic place, but from a loving place that you did that. Like that's why I'm hearing for you is like you did that. Like you did that, girl. And it's not, again, it's like with sacred reverence for the medicine you serve, but also like acknowledging your role in that too is so beautiful. And my gosh, our souls have lived many lifetimes. I don't think there's any like brand new souls. Maybe there are, but I don't feel like at this point in humanity there are. And we can derive so much healing and so much nurt- nurturing and nourishment from these previous versions of ourselves, our guides on the other side, or in the side, or in the library, and all the different ways, the stars, the constellations that the universe and God have given us as these healing tools to remind us on our path that we are really truly never alone, and we are really truly never lost. And that feeling of anxiety, that feeling of being lost is just a reminder from your higher self, hey, let's connect, let's dive in, let's plug in. And for you, that method of helping people plug in is the Akashic Records, and that is so special and beautiful. I had an Akashic Records reading. I'd love to share this. I had an Akashic Records reading and a Theta Healing once. I'd love to someday do one with you as well. And it was very healing for me on my journey. Like I shared earlier, and I've shared this before on the podcast, I've had a long journey with body things related experiences, some ideal, some less than ideal. And I had this reading done, and what I can remember is I was they were trying to show me some past life in Greece or Rome. And I was like a goddess, basically. I was like this sexy goddess woman. And I had a lot of male attention towards me. And I was just kind of like this like goddess Venusian queen or whatever. I don't know if I was a queen, but like that archetype. And I had a lover that I loved so much. I loved him, loved him, loved him. And he went away for war. And I said, okay, I'm going to save my body for you and take a vow of celibacy until you return. And she said in the reading that he never returned. And so part of my journey with my own sexuality, my own body experience is like kind of breaking that vow of celibacy, which I obviously did, spoiler alert, but more so like in my cells and in my being and in the way that I embody my sexuality and like that sacral energy of joy and creativity and sensuality and all these things. And it ended up being interesting because my husband, so I have to say this, my husband is a veteran, and I think I had met him. I can't remember honestly if this was before I met him or when we were on a break. She took a 6 month, we broke up for 6 months when we were dating before we got married. But she was one out of two psychics and guides that mentioned that I had a more recent past life with my husband being in the military or my husband being a veteran. So it was interesting
Mm.
that I married one myself in this life. But I wanted to share that because I think the more we have conversations openly and honestly about these healing modalities, the more we normalize them and the more we can share with vulnerability, like, hey, it's okay if you're scared to do this thing. Sonya's done this thing, obviously, and she's also the guide and the expert. And also I've done this thing too. And I'm just traveling as a starseed on this earth, learning as many things as I can with you guys. So I also want you to know that like I want to encourage people to get the support because it really does leave you feeling so nourished. And I remember feeling like I was floating on clouds after that for days because I just felt like, okay. And at that time I was doing a lot of work specifically with women and women's coaching, and there was a lot of like liberation that was happening in the containers that I was leading. So it was cool to get to see that that was actually, from this past life of being this Aphrodite-esque babe, you know?
Yeah, it's really so interesting because like it's one of those things where I think it's hard to explain unless you really experience it. And it's also one of those things where like it just has to resonate with you. Like someone might hear that story and be like, okay, sure, you are a goddess. Like, but if it resonated with you, then you know it's true. Right. And so that's one of those things where like I love doing like the business guidance stuff because things get validated very quickly. And like I love a tangible outcome, but doing the past life work when it resonates with my clients, it's very powerful and it's one of those things that I have had to really like access that self-trust of what's coming through. Um because yeah, like we have lived many, many lifetimes, most of us, and it goes way back. And one of my first experiences of accessing the records when I was in this course, learning how to first access for myself, one of the first experiences I had was my soul as like literally just an energy on earth that was like helping the nature of earth come to be.
Wow.
And I was like, it was so powerful in the moment of seeing it, and then when I went to talk about it later, I was like, "Okay, that sounds really wild. That sounds, like, super crazy and out there," and, like, it's one of those things where, like, It's not at all ego, but when I went to explain it, I was like, "Well, that sounds like I'm putting a really big, kind of, um, I don't know, like, power within myself to be like, 'I help created nature.'" But
But it's also like, not to cut you off, but I think it's also like, how do you implement these downloads, right? So like that's what makes it somewhat egotistical. Is like if you were to walk around being if I was going to walk around and start telling people now I am the goddess of Aphrodite, it's like no, in this life I'm not. Like I think part of it is like the humility of being like, but this life I chose this, and I
yeah,
mindset shift really changes it. Like, yeah, in a life, I'm sure you did that. Like, I could see that for you, 100%. And also in this life, you chose to be here in this physical vessel,
yeah,
be working in your business in this way, and that can be just as powerful as what you did before. But it's a different energy, is what I really feel like
yes,
can make it from this way. Because I understand that, I feel
yeah,
that. I've been in medicine ceremonies before where I can see that like we're all in different phases of our journey. And sometimes like if you don't have that grounding of like, but I also chose to be here right now in this body, sometimes
yeah,
it can kind of burn into this it can kind of make us a little bit lost. But I know that as a guide, I don't think that you create containers like that. I just wanted to bring light to that.
yes,
It's not. It's like you do feel the moment of like, wait, like am I a narcissist for saying this right now? But it's like probably not. If you're having that awareness and you're also just being like, okay, but in this life, this is what I chose. And I believe we've
yeah,
all lives of creator and lives of royalty and lives of stardom, and we've also all had lives of pauper and lives of um hardships and pain too, and like it's all
yeah.
our lives in the underworld maybe, so it's like it's all part of our unique kaleidoscope.
Completely. And it's not so much about, yeah, like what you did then, what you're doing now. But for me, it's more just understanding why you might feel connected to certain things or why you might be kind of looped into certain patterns or mindsets or lifestyles. And just again, that self-understanding um, is an interesting, like lens to put it through is just okay that may have happened in a past life. I may have experienced that in a past life. How does that inform this life? You know?
100%. I feel like that. Thank you for sharing that practical implication of this work. And I think that that sums it up of just like, how do I bring this into my day-to-day life? What do I want to take with me? And I think that is so special. So something you mentioned earlier, and this will be like my second to last question for you, is like cultivating self-trust and realizing like you really get to trust your channel, trust what's coming through when you're working with people. And this came up in a previous episode. I want to mention that there's a podcast episode I did. It was called Healing from Bereavement. And it was this beautiful human. She's an angelic Reiki master, Jade Horton, and she is a survivor of bereavement. And she was talking about when her psychic gifts were coming online, she really had to start to trust the downloads, trust her intuition. And through trusting her intuition, she cultivated this beautiful practice where she heals people every day. It sounds like you're doing that. So, how did you start to like cultivate that self trust? Was this a journey you were on before you fully harnessed your psychic gifts? Did it come more so with your practice? Like, tell us more about that experience.
I think for me, it definitely is a combination of parents who instilled in me to trust myself. Um, I feel like I have to say that as the foundation because I think there's so many people that do not get that as a foundation. And while I'm someone who has dealt with plenty of like, you know, doubts and the striving to figure out like who I am and what I'm about, I also have always had a pretty strong sense of self and confidence to know what's right or wrong for me. Which isn't to say I always make the right decisions, but I've always had trust in my intuition, even when I didn't know what intuition was. And so, yeah, I mean, like, this is a random example, but it's what's coming to mind. When I was applying to colleges, there was a college I really wanted to go to in Colorado, and then a college that I applied to in Virginia. And I got into the one in Virginia, and I hadn't heard from the one in Colorado. And I was like, okay, I visited, I liked it, I think it's a good fit. Like, I feel good about it. Let's send the deposit check. Like, I'm saying yes, I'm making the commitment. And on the day that we set the check in, I got a call from the school in Colorado that was like, hey, you can come off the wait list. We'll take you. And it was like, I had to decide, right? In that moment of like, where do I go? But I was like, no, I trust that I made the right decision. I trust that even though that seems like crazy timing, that there was a reason one was slightly delayed. And yeah, like ultimately, that there wasn't necessarily a right or wrong choice in that moment. But I think I just had to be clear with myself. What's going to be best for me? What do I think is going to be best for me? And yeah, so I would say like that's my basis. And then um, I think being a business owner is one of those things where like it can really mess with your self trust and even your trust in your intuition because I've had many experiences where I'm like, but I got the intuitive hit. I got the download. I know what I'm supposed to do. And then I'm like, wait a minute, that did not go how I wanted, or like that was not the success that I was expecting. Um, and so going through that year after year, I've been in business for like over 14 years now. Like I ultimately have enough self-trust that I can say like, okay, I'm 90% in and even if it doesn't work out the way that I really want it to or the way I envisioned it to, like I'm still trusting myself enough to lean in.
Yes.
And working with the records, it was really interesting because like I mentioned at the beginning, if you feel called to it, then it's your moment. When people ask me like, how did you decide to study the records? I kid you not, when I was sitting on my couch one night during the pandemic, and it just pinged in my brain. I think it's time for me to learn the Akashic Records. And that was it. I texted my friend who I knew had done a course. She gave me the name of the teacher. I signed up for the course, and that was it. And when I was in the program, most of the other women had already been through the program. It was their second time taking it because they were doubting and they didn't have the self trust. And we practiced with each other. They could be validated in the moment. Like, but there was that thing that I felt in the moment was separating me because I could see them still being like, I'm not sure, I'm not getting anything. And I never had that issue. I think, partially like this is part of my purpose, but also I have a lot of self trust in my intuitive giftings at this point because I've had all kinds of crazy experiences channeling historic figures and doing mediumship and predicting things that I couldn't know about. And so I've had practice in trusting in that kind of realm. Uh, but yeah, like, I don't know how to tell people, like, here's what to do and what not to do, except to say, like, keep experimenting and keep honoring what you feel and know to be true, however it comes into your like clair senses, right? Is to just keep experimenting and leaning into it.
Yeah. Just because it didn't turn out the way you thought it was doesn't mean it turned out wrong either.
Yes. And that is a really hard lesson for perfectionists and type A people.
100%. Yeah. Wow. I really appreciate you going over and just sharing that anecdote of self-trust and giving that advice to our listeners. I have had brief stints with business coaching. I realized it wasn't my calling, but I did it for a couple of years. And one of the things that came up over and over and over again was this like, but I thought I should do this course and I only had two clients, or I never wanted to teach this thing and it sold out and I have to teach it. It's like, okay, well, just because it didn't go the way that you wanted it to, it doesn't mean that it's invalid or that it was wrong or that you should stop listening to your intuition. You get to continue listening to your intuition and building that self trust, even if it brings you to an outcome that you don't want, because sometimes
Yeah.
our intuition is just like a spiritual being of choice. It knows more than you. It just simply does. And so the
Yeah.
universe, God, spirit, and also that universe, God, and spirit in your heart is not going to put you on a path that isn't meant for you, even if you really want it and you're like clinging on to it and you're like, but I really want to do this thing. It's like, okay, like you might
Yeah.
want, but I feel like in astrology, my example of this would be Saturn. So like whenever people have Saturn returns, they're usually like, my life is falling apart and I didn't get this thing I wanted. But at the end, they're like, oh, but I got this other thing and it ended up being so much better. And it's like Saturn is like, a dad that's like looking at the kid and is like, hey, like I know you want to eat 20 lollipops today, but you can't. Okay. Because if you're either A, I'm gonna take them from you and you're gonna be pissed, but then you're not gonna get a stomach ache, or B, I'll let you eat them and then you're still going to be pissed and get a stomach ache. Right. And so it's
Yeah.
like sometimes that thing, right? You'll have a longer negative negative human experience. A less
Yes.
cool
And
experience, like throwing up the lollipops, than if you could let Big Daddy's had to take them from you.
yes, and I can share with you a fun, like, client anecdote. I was, like, going through my mind trying to choose one, but, the one that's coming to mind is I was doing a reading um, for a client, and she was going to put on a retreat, and in her session, channeled through the kind of location the retreat should be at, how many women, like, the vibe, just all the things, the price, everything. Then I see her starting to promote this retreat that is the exact opposite. And I'm like, hmm, we talked about a retreat in the mountains. You're promoting something in like Miami Beach. We talked about like really kind of like earthy, grounded, like casual, dancing around the fire, being witchy. You're doing like a disco yacht luxe thing. And I was like, okay, so whatever. That's what she wanted to do. Go for it, girl. And then it basically all fell apart, and she was like, "I need to pivot because it's hurricane season in Miami." It was also like, um, she does astrology, and she was like, "Oh my god, I looked at the astrology for it, and I realized that my dates were gonna be, like, terrible." And it was high price because of all these things that she had put on. She literally changed it around. She ended up hosting it, like, in the mountains with the exact amount of women I suggested. The price point was like a third of what she had charging. She sold out. It was like everything came to be exactly as it was. And from my perspective, it was because there was some kind of moment where she went from trusting her intuition because that was already the vibe that she was leaning towards, and then she went this total opposite direction. And so from my interpretation was like, okay, you thought that's what you were supposed to do, and maybe in the future it will be, but there was this very strong intuitive guidance to do it a certain way that was going to be like what we say in the records is like the um the best possible pathway, right? Everything's about possibilities. And so it's like, what's the highest and most aligned possibility, right? Not prediction, but possibility for you. Like, could the other retreat have worked out? Sure, but like it wasn't selling. It was maybe going to be like a natural disaster. Like, and so that was just coming up as like an example of where like your intuition is probably guiding you is guiding you, and you can choose to, like, go with it or go without it, but you'll probably come back to it.
Yeah. Ah, what a cool story. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that we always end up back where we started, right? In that way.
Yes. I mean, and yeah, in so many ways, right? It's like, okay, here we are.
Yeah. Can't run your purpose, but I love also what you said about like the highest possible timeline and just honoring that like there are many timelines, none of them are bad, but there is one that is going to feel the juiciest and most expansive. And I love that you guide people to that with your work. So tell us, Sonia, how can people work with you if they want to experience this for themselves?
Yeah, so I do private one-to-one sessions for readings. You can do straight Akashic Soul Guidance reading. You can also do a combination where we do your soul guidance, and then we get into business and mindset coaching. Um, that's called my intuitive wealth hour. So we like bang through a lot in an hour, and it's a really cool combination. And then I host pretty much every month something that I call a soul session, which is a small virtual group session. It's limited to just 6 people every month, and it's only $55, and so it's very accessible. And because of the small group, everyone shows up and gets to ask a couple of questions to your soul guides. And I do a channeled energy healing for everyone. And we also have optional coaching in that as well. So that's an ongoing monthly thing. And yeah, then in my long term one to one coaching, this is built into everything that I do.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Sonia. I really appreciate it. And I know our listeners will too. And for those of you listening, go ahead and drop in the comments below, like any questions that you have about the Akashic Records. If you want and feel comfortable sharing a personal experience you've had, again, to just kind of bring light to this space to make others feel more supported and comfortable if they feel that call. And if this podcast for them is that awakening for them, like you mentioned, that thread that's like, hey, like come over here, explore this. Like I think that could be really nourishing. And feel free to share this episode with somebody that you love that you feel like could benefit from this wild wisdom. Is there anything else you want to share, Sonia? Does that feel complete?
Mm, yeah, just thank you for having me and letting me say all the words about this work. And yeah, really, truly, like if you feel that ping to explore, um, go with where your intuition leads you with it. And I'll just expand on that briefly to say, like, I had that ping on my couch. I knew someone who knew, a teacher. But there's also a great book by Linda Howe on the Akashic Records. There's lots of books on them. Um, but like, go in the direction you're meant to, because I actually didn't end up reading this book until a couple years after I had learned, and it was so great, and I resonated with it so much because of the journey that I had been on in those few years of learning and reading on my own. And so if you feel called to like read a book about it, go for it. If you want to check out my Instagram, I have some posts about the Akashic Records. If you feel called to take a course or get a reading, like just go in the direction that your intuition's leading you, because your soul guides are already telling you which way to go.
Beautiful. I love that. Follow the pings. Follow the pings.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode of the Wild Wisdom podcast. Really enjoyed this podcast. Go ahead, like, share, and subscribe to spread this wisdom to other sisters who might need it.